Hello and welcome to another alternative build LEGO Star Wars video. Today's set we're going to be trying to make something new out of is this one, the Imperial Armoured Marauder set 75311. Now this set is pretty good, but you can see from the box alone that it's quite messy. It's kind of just a big grey blob of just a bunch of studs showing all over the place. So I want to try and see if I can make this vehicle a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more clear of what it's supposed to be, and just have some fun, you know? So let's see what I can create. So first off, we've got all of the pieces that I've got available to build this set. This isn't including the extra pieces that are in the set, although I was able to use those as well. But this is basically everything I had to work with. My main colour was dark bluish grey, but I had some light bluish grey and some black stuff as well. So let's see what I did. These are all the pieces which I ended up using or having as extras by the end. You can see nothing too major here, just some like large, mainly 1x plates it seems like, with a couple of other pieces here and there. But I think this isn't too bad considering this set does have almost 500 pieces in it. And the only thing that you really keep together is the two kind of crates and then the mortar trooper. You do have to take his mortar apart for specific parts of the build, so I just gave him a blaster instead, but he still looks cool anyway. And here's what I came up with for the alternative build. I took after a vehicle seen in Star Wars Rebels and made Imperial troop transport plus a side build, which we'll get into details later. But let's kick things off detailing this little vehicle here, shall we? And here's the main vehicle, or the main part of the alternative build, I guess you can call it. You can see that the build's slightly too big for my background, but we'll have to just work with what we've got. So here we go. You can see here, if I flip it around, it is considerably smaller than the actual set, and you'll see why later on in the video. But I think this isn't too bad. A lot like the actual Imperial Armoured Marauder set. It's not particularly smooth on any of the sides. It's got a lot of outward facing studs and a lot of different colours working together to basically give it its proper look. But I think it generally achieves what it's supposed to do quite well. You can see this version iconically has the Stormtrooper station on the sides. There's supposed to be 3 gaps for each one. I could only fit 2 based on the amount of hinges I had in the set, so I could only replicate the same design 4 times across the whole build. So this is basically the best I could do. You can see in the back here the other 2 spots are empty, but they could fit other Stormtroopers in there, but they're just not included in the set, so I've got to work with what I've got. And these doors can actually flip down if I just lift it up slightly without breaking them. It'll be easier to demonstrate this side. You can just pull them downwards and they do flip down. Getting the Stormtroopers in there is a bit of a struggle. You can see there is gaps to fit their arms, but you basically need to disassemble a fair bit to do that. With what we've actually got here, see this one will come down. You can see their arms are actually just stuck inside the walls, so they're not actually able to hold any guns, which isn't great, but again, it's the best I can do. Try to keep all these sides fairly the same. I wanted to keep this same 3 stripes consistent with the same interior middle bits. There you can see there's 4 cannons on the vehicle in total. The 2 on the front and then the 2 at the sides. These 2 at the sides aren't necessarily accurate. As I said before, there should be a 3rd door just here, but again, you'll hear me say this a lot, but this just was able to fit in better with the parts I have. So these can swivel slightly up and down to get some range, I guess. But the more accurate cannons are the ones on the front. In order to get these pieces, I did have to break apart the mortar itself, like I mentioned before. But I think that was worth it overall to get this nice posing, which is quite accurate to how the front looks. There is supposed to be a window here, but there isn't really any glass pieces which would be useful in the set. So you just lift up the top slightly and you kind of get the window effect there. I quite like the angles I got on the front section with how these wedge plates kind of fit into that front modified tile. with the blasters on the side. I think that's quite nice shaping, and that was achieved with just some stud rotations on the side and being able to use this flat piece to basically cover up the gap, even though there is a small slightly gap up there. As I mentioned before, this does flip up, and you can see there's a chair in there. This doesn't have a ton of interior details, I'll be honest, but you can just lift off the roof. And it's kind of got a control panel in there. The control panel in the set itself is used somewhere else, which I'll show you later. And you can start to see back there, there's the other troopers and the gaps for the ones on that side. But there is a chair for the driver if you wanted to insert one, which I guess you can, but the other stormtrooper in this set does have a big backpack and hence cannot sit on the chair. But if you had more stormtroopers, one would fit in there. With that all back together, we can move to the top of it, which has some nice shaping around it. And then on the roof of the actual vehicle, you'll notice there's a bunch of different crates here, both the 2 ones officially included within the set, as well as 3 I just made up custom. This is there to basically act as cargo, which in universe does sit on top of this particular type of vehicle, and I thought it did add quite nicely to the look. But if you want to give the look a more battle-hardened look to it, you can kind of take all those boxes off, and it does have quite a nice shaped roof to it as well, which I think is also a pretty good look for it. Moving down to the back of the vehicle, you can see we've got 6 thrusters used with the blue 1x1 trans studs, which is the same pieces that are used on the actual set, but I just kind of moved them around so they're in a different shape and used some other pieces to give it like a big main thruster in the middle, and just tried to shape it quite nicely with this round piece, which I think works quite well, just to give it a bit of a different look to the back. And yeah, I think it ends the shape quite nicely. Again, I like this hinge piece on the side because it does add some nice detail to the side, which does make it look like it's quite heavy with armor, with grill plates and cheese slopes and different types of connections, just to make it look as strong as possible. And also I like the curves on the top and the bottom, which does give it that quite nice rounded shape on the side, which I think is quite accurate, and I'm quite happy with how that turned out. As I've mentioned many times, this vehicle isn't perfect, but I think for what I'm trying to achieve and what it's going for, it could certainly be worse, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out overall. Now, one thing I didn't really like about the official Imperial Armoured Marauder set is that Greef Karga kind of has nothing to defend himself besides his blaster. You can see in the actual box image, he's the one who basically looks like he's in control of the Marauder itself. And I know in the episode that's kind of how it went down, but in the universe overall, that's not the case. So I thought for this version of the set, if I was able to make my main vehicle a little bit smaller, I could use some of the leftover pieces to make a little thing to defend against the actual vehicle. And I came up with this little thing. Now, you might be wondering, Sam, what on earth have you done here? Well, I have basically taken all of the slope pieces in the set and tried to make some kind of rocky wall at the bottom to kind of represent the rocks of Navarro, and kind of create this station for Greef Karga to defend himself on. You can see he's got this turret next to him, where I used all of the stud shooters in the set to basically create this little defensive turret, and he's kind of got this little cockpit to shoot off from. I used a large glass piece, which I actually didn't know was included in the set until I built it. I saw that in the parts when I was about to make the build, and I thought, no idea how I'm going to include this, but I did eventually find a use along with the kind of trapdoor piece, which I've also used to kind of create this wall around it, which I think was quite some interesting part usage there. There's also some window frames, which I used to kind of build up the sides for this little building, and another one of the chairs to kind of just seat them up. You can see that control panel I mentioned earlier is used here because it's more visible, I guess, so Greef Karga can just use that to shoot off the guns. And you can imagine that if this was an actual set, there is like a fair play scenario here of the vehicle trying to attack Greef Karga and him try to shoot back. I don't know who's going to win this fight, but you never know. I quite like the shaping I got around this main kind of window section using some chase slopes and these pieces at the bottom to kind of create an almost studless look. You can see there's the four at the top, those two closest to the chase slope I couldn't do anything about, but the other ones still waiting on that corner chase slope piece. Lego will make it one day, but I'm still waiting. It's my most needed piece in existence, a corner chase slope. Please give it to me, but we'll have to wait another day. Again, I wish this top was tiled as well, probably using this piece on the front here, but it looks better here than it would up there, so I'm still happy with my use there. But yeah, I think this is a fair little thing to give to Grief Karga just as some form of opposition, rather than just making another big grey vehicle. I made a slightly smaller grey vehicle and a little grey gunning tower. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this. And there you have it, the Imperial Armoured Marauder alternative build, the Imperial Troop Transport, plus Grief Karga's, I don't even know how to describe it, just turret defense, I guess. This was quite a fun little challenge for my first real alternative build on the channel, instead of just going through and just making some small builds but keeping a ton of extra pieces. This is using a vast majority of the pieces to create something which is fairly different, I think, even though the vehicles are quite similar. I think enough has been changed here overall, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. If you like how this turned out, like the video. That's what the like button's there for. Comment your favourite aspect of the build. For me, it probably is that shaping around the front centre of the vehicle, just there, I like quite a lot. And this is just quite funny to me overall. And subscribe if you're new to see more alternative builds like this. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I really do appreciate it. And goodbye.